Okay, we're live. Is this okay? It's okay?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Oops. I'll get it.
Okay, hello everyone. Hello. Please come to order. Okay, so Professor Gates is watching us online. He's in Santa Monica, unfortunately. And I think he will be presenting at a gala, or he is participating in a Foundation's gala event. But he's here. Okay, so welcome everyone, and good afternoon. Today's colloquium will be presented by Charles Martin, and it is the penultimate session of the semester. Yes, we have one more to go. Charles Martin is presenting from Optical Thinking, a book of his photography and text. Now retired, he has served as professor of Afro-American Studies at Brown University, of English at West Virginia University, and of comparative literature at Queens College at the City University of New York. His photographs have been included in such books as Picturing New York, Photographs from the Museum of Modern Art, Committed to the Image, Contemporary Black Photographers, and Deborah Willis's Reflections in Black, A History of Black Photographers, 1840 to the Present. In New York, he is represented by June Kelly Gallery, where he has had 8 solo shows. And recently, his exhibit, Faces, Figures, Fantasy, was the inaugural exhibition at Global Vision Art Gallery in Brooklyn. His museum solo exhibitions include Museo Histórico e Artístico do Maranhão in Brazil, Musée Public National d'Art Moderne et Contemporaine in Algiers, Musée de la Halle Saint-Pierre in Paris, and Alice Austin House Museum in New York. So please welcome Professor Charles Martin.
Thank you very, very much. everyone who has made it possible for me to be here. Special thanks, of course, to Krishna for this wonderful introduction. I'd like to thank Abby, and of course, as I said, everyone associated with the center. I'd of course like to thank Skip Gates, who has obviously great administrative and intellectual energy, and with whom I have suffered over 50 years of friendship. Skip, though today not quite an invisible man, but a virtual one, is nonetheless here because he wrote the introduction to this book, Optical Thinking, that we're going to be looking at. What I'm really doing today is unveiling the work for this book. And the accomplishment of the work has been incredibly accelerated by my being here at the Hutchins Center. I came here with no significant experience of Cambridge or Boston, and I've really enjoyed getting to know the Hutchins Center. I would like to point out, though, that I actually did have one prior connection with Massachusetts, with North Brookfield, which on the map is about 70 miles west of here. And that is when I was a teenager. I went to a camp that a lot of kids from my neighborhood went to, but I only went there once, called Camp Atwater. You know Atwater, okay. And when I was there were a lot of kids from DC, okay. And Atwater was founded in 1921. It was set up to be a place to foster cultural, academic, and social needs of Black youth, and I was there, okay. In any case, when I was 12 or 13 years old, and had hardly heard of any colleges other than those around Philly and Virginia State, where my mom went, and Lincoln University, whose graduates include one Henry A. Martin Sr., who would be my dad. I now am happy to be here at the Hutchins Center, and I stand here at Harvard showing off my Harvard socks. Before I go on, I would like to say we have one very special guest with us, and that is Dr. Jesse Algeron Rhynes, who we know since we've been in graduate school. And as I point out to him, or as he brags to people or rubs in, I had my first exhibition, it was not his first, in a two-person show with Jesse called African Eyes, as in eyes, African Eyes, as in make it African, Brazil, which was his photographs from, I think, largely Mali, and mine from Brazil. Okay, so we're going to start looking at some of the material of optical thinking. One of my favorite musicians, and I have many, was Prince, and Prince sang, "Ain't no particular sign I'm more compatible with." And I would say the same thing, but not speaking about the zodiac, but about most things in life. Our experiences, from my point of view, are general. We see, if not everything, we see a lot. The artist, African-American artist, Raymond Saunders, has warned against what he called setting the black arts outside the current of arts as a whole. And that's from his essay, Black is a Color, which is a response to an essay that had been written by the poet, novelist, critic, editor, Ishmael Reed. Okay, so we are going to get started with what I'm calling the red book, because the cover is red. I have been lucky to get the aid of various people who are going to help me, and we're going to start, and this will be the order, okay? The people you're going to hear are Bois Lupuwana, Claudia Jeremiah, Harry Allen, Kleber Amancio, James McNally, Bertoni Louis, and of course, Mr. Jesse Rhynes. Okay, so let's get started. Bois will be our first voice. No, please come here.
Hello, everybody. I'll be reading a poem titled Whispers, or Uyahleba in Zulu.
Uyahleba. Abantu nezindawo ezikhiwo ezigoqwayo noma ezintsha ezibonwa ngokuqondile noma ezibukwa zifana nemindawo noma izithombe ezigqoshiwe imigqa nemilo eqondaniswe futhi ishiciwe kuhlanganiswe futhi kubonwe ngama-lens kuze kunamathiselwe ngezinye izikhathi ngemibonaniso ngemalanga noma inkumbulo. Kuye kwaphawulwa ukuthi uqondanise izinto kungene ngezindlela kuthole kukhona nomalingo owenzeka nezinye izikhathi lapho izinto ziphafala kalokhu kungese kube nezifundo sokaphila imbonaniso akushumamise imzwelo futhi yini eyenza umuntu acabange. Uyahleba.
Thank you very, very much. Some of you are familiar with my book, Because of Algiers, which is in English, French, and Arabic. You have just heard the first time I've ever been translated, brought into Zulu. So thank you very much. And I wonder how many Zulu presentations have been done here. So thank you very, very much. In case you're interested in what she's saying, she said, whispers, people and places, structures, worn or new, seen directly or in reflection are, like drawings or sculpture, lines and shapes aligned and shuffled, brought together and sighted by eyes and lenses to be affixed, sometimes in film, in pixels or memory. It has been commented that getting things in focus is only one of the ways to discover. There is also a magic that sometimes happens when things blur. In this case, in this, there may be a life lesson. Documents stir emotions, and what fuels imagination? Whispers. Okay. A couple of images that might suggest whispers are these. This happens to be the Flatiron Building in New York City. This happens to be from an apartment in Copacabana in Rio de Janeiro. This picture of the bike, of course, could be anywhere, but it happens to be in Rio. And on the right, we have a bus shelter in New York City, which I really loved the image of the fellow there with something across his face, very slightly seen, neglected, and somehow the photographer got in the edge of the photograph. I don't know how that happened. Okay. We have also here, I don't know if you can make her out because she is obviously a blur. This is the wonderful and unfortunately late musician, Jerry Allen, the great piano player. Okay, composer, that's Jerry. Okay, the next voice we're going to hear is that of Harry Allen. Would you please step up? Thank you.
After the click, shadow and act brightened, colored through a camera lens, memories, not especially for recall, but rather destined to be transposed moments, not blueprints, but sketches and renders, suggestions, whispers of what might be, special deliveries to unfold and absorb, whales of information spout blowhole mists of entranced ideation, images, imagery, combine sighted bits and pieces into cues of swells that wave dreams, cherry-picked, not to be recollecting, nor tropes for trophy, but to spark the yawning mind awake to contemplation, to respond to a semaphore for earnest investigation. documents, not of here, not of there, magnetize an alert imagination, to proliferate and evoke how the mind can fly, soar from an image and engage and appraise its possibilities, raise a beehive for drones who have fertilizing ever to do. Leaves of light, branches of sight, photographic rays trace contours of the earth, avenues, figures, and faces, lifting exteriors into an exuberant inner space and caressing for insight, rivers deep or oceans of wrinkled reflection. Peering, discerning more or other in the photographs than was there in naked reality, inhabited not by ghosts, but by buoyant spirit, images inspirited, animated by the experience of looking, joy of cooking, of hypotheses, too, of perusing, making new recipes, collaborating, elaborating from the printed page, the billboard, or the digital screen, large or small. Flaneurs, sometimes of cities and countrysides, cityscapes and landscapes, imagined transitive vision rambles through windows and sheets of water, through streaks of glass, scraps of real banquets, picnics, or leftovers sumptuous for thought. Flaneurs, discoverers of what might be the photo itself, an active frame for ongoing inquiry, still life enlivened. Seeing in the moment of observation that passes from a lens along to other eyes, a sight to flow through. Observation, not of the shooter who releases the carrier pigeon camera, whose focus, sharp or vague, invites, possibly insights. The wandering winged eye of the viewer, now become a traveler too, meandering no longer through a lane or an alley or a trail, but through the photo, ingesting its tactile sights and suggestions of sounds. Not of what preceded, but of the etude that proceeds from it, the moment that extends its reach, the moment of embracing the image, imagining, imaginating what it might be, what it will be, perhaps what it was, where it came from and where it has come. Sanctioned slugs of recall give way, usurped by energetic projection of the self. Led from the image in ricochets and rebounds boundless. Hughes, the graduate of Lincoln University, wondered as he wandered. We can wonder as we look, unraveling the hermetically documented to let it hoist a conscious level to the towers of imaginative power. No permit required, necessary trespassing provisions unfurling, a moment to eyeball and glance into flight, to be launched into consideration and reverie. Roads and corridors, definitions and expansions unconfined by the physics of place, captured perhaps, photographed paths that from time then to time now transcend the airy or spectacular and land in a plain or a mountain or a sea or a tropical forest of insight gathered from passing glance. An invitation to voyage, a call for investigation through the careful leisure of ancillary gaze, unveiling an aftermath, harmonic or chaotic, not of what someone else saw, but of what you see now, after the click.
Thank you, Harry. Okay. Here we have a little continuation of that idea. And we also have a very special set of eyes. That would just happen to be my my oldest daughter wearing one of my hats, okay? And you can make what you like of the other two images, particularly the flag.
What nation is that from?
This is the United States, ripped and torn and shorn. So these are also about eyes. And For our next reader, our next voice, Claudia, can we have you?
Eyes have it. Black marks on lines and space. Notes of the musical page. Specific order adhere to follow. For the holder of an instrument of the singer of a voice. Determinate notes to play. When and with what sequence. Volume of the touch and depth of the breath. Annotated. Exactly written. Prescribed. Bearing error, a score of perfectly playing. Performance of the chart for song or symphony. Precision expression of the composer's intention. Ears familiar with the music are attuned in expectation and expect to hear it that way, free from scourge of deviation. After moments of acceptable tone-up, cacophony, a different note, or one held longer, or a chapel shorter than an indicated interval, is not a note of grace, but a mistake, a wrong note, a symbol that shouldn't have crashed, a symbolic clash. A forte boom where a pianissimo rest was written, truly may cause a stir of disaccord, bang the auditor to audible gasps. But for the improviser, performance requires seeing, mostly hearing, notes a sketch not to fill in, but to expand, to hover above and behind. Photos, framed tightly as a musical notes written on page, can be a core to investigate. Elements of the compositions are right from somewhere, say to some, read as, but not too far. To others, underscored, the messages, different, is crisscross in destination. Is ticket one way or round trip, destination unknown, marked, read as far an eye can see.
Thank you very much. Okay. Where are we? We are, I just want to mention here, again, this whole question of naming images. The photograph of the dress, when I presented it in my gallery, June Kelly Gallery, I was, as is always the case, asked to provide a title for it. And so I titled it Broken Dreams. And at the show, an artist came out to me and said, "That's not the right title. It should be Shotgun Wedding." So that's just something you should think about, you know. And some people also have said to me, well, it doesn't make any difference because nobody cares what the titles are anyway. But it's just something to think about, the possibility of laying or attaching different titles or hooks on particular images, okay? And then the photograph, of course, of the glove with a watch with President Obama might really be now like, what time is it? Okay, our next reader is going to be Jesse Rhines. Jesse, would you come up here, please? And let me point out that Jesse is truly versatile because he didn't know he was doing this until this morning.
I didn't. I'm sending him a bill. Hi, y'all. Okay, the name of this is Title Search. Creators of words we are, sprung almost from text, from the womb, dripping not just the mother's sweat, but leaking words. Given a name to embody or fit, if not right away, then to rise into. If not labeled, then channeled or inspired. A name, a word, to determine how to be seen, to size us up and announce who we are. If not, no, wait a minute, stepping out and over an unwanted legacy or aligning with a senior or escaping a junior, perhaps to manufacture one, or simpler, to remove a disliked sound, sonorous in ways felt oppressive or insignificant in expression, too personalized or not enough, too pertinent or too rude. Some people, nemesis or friend, in or out of the band, unsatisfied with the enunciation, its sound or its heritage, invoke another, intended likewise to bend impression, a slant assumpto to sum someone up with a vocalized ring, intone a particular cultural path, or clashing in revoke, indicate another. By any other name would a Rose or Henry be the same? And what names we give photographs, titles or labels, direct or indirect, categories and methods: fashion, architecture, nature, landscape, aerial, underwater, portrait, snapshot, candid, posed, point and shoot, essay, study, documentary, one-off. Art, ID, keepsake, limited edition, laudatory condemnation. A name of the photograph claws at the scene or bears to be seen. It's worth being heard, a snarl at meaning. A predator or guard for the herb, a fence to be seen. No name for regard. Title search.
Thank you, Jesse. Here we have another image, and I'll say nothing about it, but we will hear some words from James.
As soon as I saw the photo, I knew that you were going to say me.
Of course.
Okay. Henri Cartier-Bresson often referred to geometry, so evident in his photos, as essential to visual art. People delight in form. Occasionally, a dream or a nightmare is concocted from concrete, glass, metal, water, earth, sky, and light. Alfred Stieglitz, photographer and advocate of art, was famously appalled at the idea that the power of his photography came from its subject matter. Stieglitz wanted to show that photography could be more or less free of reference. Reformulated, the thought might be that sight itself can ultimately be the primary subject. What do people really see in a photo? A trustworthy explanation of the photographer's relationship to subject matter, or an image that might, as though it were a mantle in a story of Edgar Allan Poe, hold discoverables hidden in plain sight, overlooked in serious search by certain inspectors, eyes wide shut and oblivious to the hyper-obtrusive, but evident to the attuned detective.
Thank you, James. Let's look at another image here. And, well, I'll save my comments for a second. We will now hear the voice of Clever.
Hello, everyone. Consider the component of imagination in photography. The sights in photography may seem to be a simple recording, but they can equally be complex. While photography sometimes records accurately, it can also free as improvise. Music make inference and innuendo and invite the viewer into a visually rich voyage. Getting lost in a photo can be both a visual and figurative thing. Some photographs are not mirror images, but rather are transparent labyrinths drawn from surfaces, interiors, and reflections. Their complexity and layers are not intended to produce anxiety or disorientation, but to induce contemplation, consideration, a pleasure of discovery. Even in a crystal clear documentary style photograph, there can be confusion or overlaps which come about, sometimes because of the way we perceive it, and at other times because of the overlaps that are the product of cultural borrowings and impositions, declared or not, which have displaced and moved items, styles, and ideas, not to mention languages and people, from place to place, connected only through imagination.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to move back quickly to an image here. See anything you recognize, Malika? We have among us the daughter of one of my favorite artists, Ed Clark. Malika Clark is here. This photograph is a still from a short kind of comic movie that I made. The mirror in the center of the photograph is a character. To the left, there's a blurred photo. It's blurred in this image. It's not actually a blurred photograph. That's another character. And in the mirror, there is another character who happens to be a painting by Ed Clark. Can we have now Bertoni?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Active speech. Active speech. Actions speak louder than words, but photographs usually don't. Reverberant images without audible signals gone silent with the faint click of shutter release. Visual signs that signify in multiple unclear languages, prone to foggy transliteration while defying simultaneous translation. Impossible à traduire, difficile à traduire, objects of much revision of vision, vision, unmouth photographs blank repeatedly, yawn and display of silent speech and clandestine shouts, tongue-tied, delving into or skirting carefully focused signs of a recklessly eyeballed cornucopia. Commentators, some of them photographers, declaim a fixed reaction, subservient or superior to the glass silence of a clear lens and its shouts of sign. Look.
So would you please give, again, thanks to these voices of the Hutchins Center. I would call them the totally ready for primetime players. And they've actually read the material. Okay. What you have seen is from this one, volume 2, which I think of as the Red Book. Okay, I'll go a little bit more into that as I go forward. Before that, though, I'd like to show this is a booklet that I made to accompany a series of talks out at Queens College. And I know Michael Rogers, you're listening out there. Michael Rogers was one of the people who was speaking at this. We did it for 4 weeks, and I did like 4 exhibitions. And this happens to be from a beach in Salvador, Bahia, Brazil. We are switching here to Brazil for a couple of reasons. First of all, or among those reasons, Kleber pointed out to me that today, the 20th of November, is the Dia de Zumbi. So in Brazil, this is celebrated as a day of recognition, not of the bureaucratic act of abolition, but to celebrate Zumbi, who set up the Free Republic in spite of slavery in Palmares, which is in northern Brazil. So it's sort of a recognition of the effort, the resistance required to bring about change, as opposed to the bureaucratic acknowledgement or acceptance after the fact. So today is the Dia de Zumbi, the day of Zumbi. And Kleber pointed that out to me.
Poetic.
Yes, quite. We're also going to Brazil, though, because you'll recall that when Claudia did her presentation, she started off with an object. And this is a similar object. This one is from the Mercado Modelo, the model market in Salvador, Bahia. And it is, part of African-derived religion. This is the setting where I saw it in a stall. It was really funny because my Portuguese was kind of new at that point. And I was looking at the stall. I didn't buy anything, of course. And they walked up to me and said, do you find something interesting here? And I said, oh, I was just thinking it'd be a great photograph. And I walked away. And after I walked away, they followed me and they went, we get it, come back. And they emptied the stall and said, do what you want to do. Okay, so I photographed in that stall. And since we're on the subject of African-derived religion, I don't know if anyone recognizes the object on the right side. Okay, Kleber, I'm sure you recognize this. This is a close-up of it. This is a Casa de Exu. This is a place where the spirit of Exu, the messenger traveler of the crossroads of the universe, the creator of Ashe, some people think of him as being similar to either Hermes or Mercury, but this is a place where his spirits are gathered before one carries out an energetic offering and so forth. The bottles that are inverted are thought of as capturing the energy of the spirit. Here, of course, they're mud covered. I don't know if any of you have seen it. I'm sure some of you have seen it, but if you see the film by Julie Dash, Daughters of the Dust, there are trees that have these bottles that are inverted and they're clear. They're called bottle trees. If I'm not mistaken, I believe bottle trees are mentioned in Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man by James Weldon Johnson. And after hearing about it, I really wanted to see one, and I believe, or it could be a figment of my imagination, I believe I actually did see one once somewhere in the American South, okay? But this is the equivalent, okay? Capturing the energy of spirits. And since we're dealing with those sorts of spirits, this is in fact among other things, a Paji Santo, a spirit priest. And this is on the island of Itaparica, which is in the state of Bahia, okay? So I just thought that I would make a call and response with Claudia, and she saw that picture and actually twisted my arm, and now it's evidently going into an article that she is publishing. Okay, yes?
How big is that object?
Okay, the usual size is something small. It could be like a necklace, okay? That particular one is something that's unusual that's worn around the waist, okay? You don't see that very often, okay? And of course, in the photograph, it's difficult to tell, but that's what it was. It was a big one, but the usual is like a little small thing.
Yeah, I thought the one on Claudia's cover looked like it was a smaller one, and this looked like it's...
Yeah, which was part of what attracted me to it. Okay, this is just some further glimpses of some of the material that's in the Red Book. This would relate to the section Whispers. As James, of course, has pointed out to me many times, I have a great fascination, or he recognizes my fascination with glass. Not mirrors, but with glass, where there's area for reflection, there's depth and overlaying and so forth and so on. And of course, this just happens to be the studio of one of my very favorite musicians. This is Electric Lady Studios in New York, the studio of Jimi Hendrix. Here we have another version of that same idea, same kind of idea. This one happens to be in Algiers. Algeria, not, there's an Algiers, Louisiana, right, too? But this is Algiers, Algeria. This image here is from a whole series that I do, and these are all images that are in this book, okay? An image of public space, and I look at public space as something that can be, of course, variously defined. It can be a public institution, it could be a street, it could be anything where people go, and one of the things that becomes interesting in public space is the way that people define it or redefine it. What are the rules that determine who can use it, and that sort of thing. And it's very interesting that in this case we're being told that this public space ought to be free of guns. I had never seen this before. This was only several months ago. This is right in Times Square in New York City. I was really quite surprised. Okay, so this is part of that series of public space. And I'd also just like to add, I did a whole series of photographs of the Pinacoteca, which is a beautiful museum in Sao Paulo. And at that time, the director, Manuel Araújo, had just taken over. He was about to assume authority there. And I met him, and when he heard of my project, he just said to me, "The museum is public space." And so he invited me in, and I photographed the whole museum from top to bottom, everything that's in there, you know, bathrooms, exhibition space, cloakrooms, workers, everything. And he just said, "It's public space." Okay, these happen to be public, but this is a different series. This series is called Speak Up, where people are speaking out. And so here we have the Statue of Liberty. This happens to be in New York. To the right, this is the beach in at Copacabana in Rio. And this piece was obviously a statement about violence against women. This is New York City, just a apartment house underlining or reaffirming Black Lives Matter. So again, these are images of Speak Up. Now this one to me is really interesting at a number of levels, okay? First of all, we're told post no bills, okay? And there's this poster of a policeman beating someone with, of course, the ironic statement, "I work for you." Okay, so there's also just the idea of don't post bills, and someone decided to post that bill here. And at the same time, there's, you know, bits of tagging, I guess, you know, writing, so there's some sort of decorativeness. And it's also, from my point of view, ironic that this would also be the often associated blue of the police, okay? Now this is completely, this is in the Bronx, and this was, you know, a street painting talking about how to defend oneself or things that one can do when one is ordered around by the police. So this would be speaking up and directly speaking to people who might need this advice. The photograph on the left was in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. This is recent. This was a protest in support of Palestine, and then to the right we have the hopes that some had that Kamala Harris might have been our next president. That was in a shop in New York City. I happen to be fascinated by masks of every sort, masks that are handmade, masks that are made by artists of whatever kind. The mask on the left happens to be in an apartment where I lived for 6 months in Paris. On the right, people were very quick, very comfortable, you know, putting on masks that they might have. You know, a lot of people have masks in their house, and I would just say, "Oh, would you put that mask on?" Okay. This one is also kind of a joke because if you look on the windowsill, there's a tiny little statue of the Empire State Building, and that is the Empire State Building in the window in the background. Okay. Here's another mask. This was at this guy's house. This happens to be Buford Smith, who I believe was the founder, and if not the founder, one of the directors of the Colloquium Workshop, which is a group of African-American photographers, I believe started in New York, and that seems to be there, I think, the base of Colloquium. That just happens to be a mask that was at his house. Now the next mask is Malenka wearing this mask in her house, okay? And the other mask and you can see little bits of Ed's painting standing up there. And the other mask is a child, which happens to, again, be one of my daughters. Another series of photographs that I'm rather fond of, I love clouds. And so I've done a whole lot of photographs of clouds of every sort, all times of day and night. Clouds are really interesting because they are, of course, aside from being aesthetic, they're marks of nature, but they've also become marks of pollution, sometimes. So this is, again, one of those statements that, the aesthetic applies to everything. The fact that it's beautiful doesn't make it good or bad. I always say, tigers are beautiful, but I'm not going to go and go, oh, it's so beautiful, because it'll kill me, okay? So this is a whole series of photographs about clouds. And I would also add that my oldest daughter is struggling or trying to become a writer. And I asked her to write me some statement about cloud mania, and she never did. Or she put it off for a long time. And a magazine in Brazil published these photographs, or published a group of them. And so I called her up and I said, if you're going to do this, I need it in 2 days. And so she came through. Now I had written, which is in this book, a poem about the clouds, okay? When she gave me what I thought was an essay, instead she gave me a poem. And I kid you not, I could have edited the 2 poems into one. Her choice of imagery and language was mine, okay? And so for the purposes of the publication in Brazil, I put my poem aside and published hers. So that was her first publication. But in my book, it's my poem that's in there, okay? And not hers, okay? I got 2.
No, I mean you only get one pass.
Exactly, only one pass, okay. And so this is a combination of things. This is, again, the clouds. We also have mask. We have reflections. And so this is, again, cloud mania. Where is this? This is on Broadway above Dyckman Street. Dyckman Street is 200th Street in Manhattan. And so this is on the west side of the street in a reflection, okay?
I'm sorry, it looks like an alien is peering through the clouds.
That is quite possible. That is quite possible. So when you write your title for the photograph, that can be it. Okay. Now, this is what I'm calling the black book. Okay. So this is the first one. Okay. When I applied for this fellowship, I, as an afterthought, said, well, why don't I do the book? Okay. So I did a book. And then when I got here, I said, well, why don't I do another one? Okay, so now we have volumes 1 and volume 2. They're different, except that both volumes, and I hope to do like 2 or 3 more, have whispers, okay, which is that section of kind of suggestive images, okay. This one has also much more architecture, and it also has the section Storied People, which is basically portraits. So let me just say a few things about portraits. There was a woman here, I think she's a professor in some branch of Harvard, and she was sitting with someone who I happen to know, and I said, oh, can I take your photograph? And she said, why would you photograph me? You don't know me. And that's something we should think about, that there is a genuine suspicion on the part of many people as to why would you photograph me? What do you want? What are you going to do with the photograph? Okay, and A lot of these things, though, have to be seen as growing out of typical photo usage. Okay, we often use photographs for identification, as in, a driver's license. We have Harvard IDs, that sort of thing. Photographs are used for surveillance, and of course, we also use them for memories. And for those of you who use your cell phones, they clog up your phones with all these photographs. When I was a kid, we put all of our little photographs in shoe boxes under the bed. Okay, but they were memories, a photo as a memento. But there are also photographs as simply image, as sketch, or art. And, obviously, if you're like a professional portrait photographer or a landscape photographer, you don't really care about knowing the people. You just take the picture. Okay, it's just something you make. Okay, so there are a lot of reasons to do portraits, and my portraits here are, I call them storied people. And they're storied not necessarily because the people are well known, which some of them are, but because there are stories that one could talk about in relationship to the way that the photograph was made. Okay, let me also drag Malenka into this again. I don't know if she's going to remember this or not, but I was at her house one day, and I was showing a bunch of photographs, and a number of them happened to be portraits of famous people. And this is when she was much younger. Okay, and Malenka turned to me and said, "Wow, how do you know all these people?" And I said, "I don't know any of them." And her dad said, "Chuck, you could at least milk this. You could say, like, well, I got to know them and so forth and so on." Okay? But that was just to say that for me, photographing people has nothing to do with knowing them. Okay? It's just that you take the photograph. Okay? As in, I don't need to know the tree. You take the picture. Okay? So people for me are the same. All right. The first photograph, clever, you'll probably know who this is. This is Emmanuel Araújo, who was the founder of the Museu Afro-Brasil, which is a very important museum in Sao Paulo. He also completely revitalized the Pinacoteca, which is also in Sao Paulo. He was Minister of Culture of the state of Sao Paulo. He ran a museum in Bahia, or I don't think he ran that museum, but he worked there, which is where he discovered he had a taste for museum work. He's also a very important sculptor and a printmaker. And as I said, he let me photograph, he invited me to photograph the Pinacoteca when he was just about to assume leadership of the Pinacoteca. And in this particular photograph, I have him in front of red and black, which, if you know a candomblé or African-derived religions in Brazil, that happens to be a shoe. So it's also kind of a joke. Okay, that's Emmanuel. And since he passed away, the museum is now also named in his honor. Okay. Now this is the exact opposite. This is a woman I never saw before in my life. I was standing outside her house. This is in Olinda in northern Brazil. And she was watching me take some photographs. And she said, "Oh, you're taking photographs? Come inside my house. It's really interesting." And so I photographed this house, or just the living room. I photographed her, and I photographed her little daughter, okay? But I don't think you can look at the photograph and know if I know her or not, okay? She could be a friend, but I never saw her again in my life. This is, of course, the great Cape Verdean singer Cesária Évora, who I was fortunate to meet in Algiers. She was literally the first person I met when I got off the plane. They said to me, "Oh, come, have a seat, have a cup of coffee." And I was like, "But what about my bags?" And they said, "Oh, no, come have a seat." And there's Cesária. And so I had a cup of coffee with her and took some pictures that were all horrible. But fortunately, I crossed her path a number of times and got better pictures the next time. Okay, so that's Cesária. And fortunately, I knew who she was because I had seen her perform in New York. This is Mrs. Vivian Hewitt. She and her husband collected African American art. They lived in New York. Neither one of them is living now. Her art collection was purchased by Bank of America. And I forget where Bank of America is located. I think it's maybe North Carolina. And at their headquarters, they have her collection. And I was hired to make a movie of that, which I I did. Okay, so there's a movie that I made of her collection, and she's just a delightful, delightful woman, Mrs. Hewitt. Now, I don't photograph children very often. This is at the Instituto Anchieta Grajaú, which is it's a non-governmental organization in Sao Paulo, created by a very important architect, Roberto Loeb, to help people who are in a financially challenged neighborhood, okay? And so this institute has all these programs of education for kids from like really small up to maybe teenagers. And the place is so careful or restrictive and who can go there that if you go in, like the kids just know, you're cool, we like you, okay? So she was one of those many kids who were just like totally, totally happy and pleasant. Now this photograph is a very special one. I mean, I think a lot of them are special. But this is Sam Shaw, okay? Sam Shaw was a photojournalist, but he also had a big hand in movies. He's the guy that produced Paris Blues, which is the movie that starred Sidney Poitier, Diane Carroll, Joanne Woodward, Paul Newman. The music was by Duke Ellington, with some guest appearances by Louis Armstrong. Duke Ellington was nominated actually for the Academy Award for Best Music for that movie. Sam also produced some work for John Cassavetes. He did a lot of independent filmmaking stuff. And he's most famous though he's the guy that designed for, or who set up for Some Like It Hot, the famous famous photograph of Marilyn Monroe with the dress flying. He's the guy that did that, okay?
He's Brazilian?
No, Sam is a total New Yorker, okay? And I'm not a big Marilyn Monroe fan, okay? Sam adored Marilyn. He just adored her. And evidently when, I forget which film it was, but he was working on some film in Hollywood, and Marilyn was just kind of a gopher, and so she was his chauffeur. So he just, endless stories about Marilyn Monroe, but that's Sam. Sam was a really great guy. And when he saw my little Leica camera, he said, well, I can't use that, it's too small for my hands. And he pulled out his like heavy Nikon, okay? That's Sam. This is Spalding Gray. Anybody ever seen the movie Swimming to Cambodia? Okay. Spalding Gray, I just happened to run into him in the street. And I said, would you mind if I took your picture? And being, I guess, a true actor or a certain kind of actor, he said, go right ahead. And he didn't move. And I said, well, would you mind turning? And he just, I took the picture. And that was it. That, of course, is Kathleen Cleaver. That photograph is from a presentation that we both participated in for the magazine Black Renaissance, Renaissance Noir, which was published at NYU, okay? Incidentally, when my first trip to Algiers, she was there. She was a special guest, kind of repeating or returning to the place where she and Eldridge Cleaver had been in exile many, many years before. And these are just two gentlemen up on the equator, São Luís de Maranhão. I was walking by there, and by the way, you pronounced Maranhão very well. I was walking by there, and I saw them, and I said, wow, this is a great image, and I just didn't want to bother them. So I kept on going. Then I went, I will never see this again in my life. So I went back, and I said, would you mind if I took your photograph? And they were like, sure, go ahead. You know. So this is back in the days of mechanical cameras. I took two images. The first one, the dog was looking like this. When he heard the click, he turned, and that's the picture. Now this is a very special fellow. This is José Nascimento Moraes Filho. This is again in São Luís de Maranhão. São Luís de Maranhão, among other things, has incredible reggae music. Okay, it's a big reggae center. And that was one reason why I went there. But also people just told me, you know, you would find the culture up in Maranhão very interesting. And I met this guy, and I was in this like little cafe, and he walked in. He knew everybody there, of course, except me. And he says, "Ah, communist, how are you?" And then he looks at me and goes, "And what are you doing here?" And this is my first trip to Brazil. I was a graduate student. I said, "I'm a graduate student at Yale, and I'm doing research on African American culture, or on Afro-Brazilian culture, particularly literature." And his eyes lit up. He said, "Come with me." And he took me to the library and showed me a manuscript by this author, Maria Firmina dos Reis. The book was published in 1859, Ursula. And I looked at the book and I read it and I said, yeah, I can use this. And I gave a speech there at the library. But I, more importantly, used it in my doctoral dissertation. And when I was doing it in my doctoral dissertation, a good friend of mine who's a novelist and also an academic in Rio de Janeiro, she said, "Oh, you know what? I think I can get this published for the 150th anniversary of abolition, and can we use your essay as the prologue?" So that little book here, that's the edition that I wrote the prologue for. That was in 1988. The book was really unknown. Nascimento Moraes Filho was just thrilled that anybody wanted to pay attention to the book. The book has now become quite important over like 40 years later. And it's, a few years ago, it was on the equivalent of the SATs in Brazil, okay? And it's kind of funny because nobody paid any attention to him at all before me. When my friend decided to do the book, he got word of her, and he called her up and going, "Who are you? And you don't know anything. The only person who knows anything is Chuck." And she said, "Chuck's my friend." And he said, "Oh, okay." So it's just that's just an example of how difficult it is sometimes to get interest in a book. And it can take a long, long time. Now the book is in many, many editions. I think last year, a Brazilian woman, I don't know who she is, but I think she teaches at, I don't know, a school in New Orleans. She translated it into English. The book is now available in English, Ursula. Okay, that's Nascimento Moraes Filho. The next picture includes Abdias Nascimento, who was a tremendous actor, politician, a painter. I was very, very lucky. My first trip to Brazil, I was a delegate to a conference that he was running of black cultures in the Americas. Okay, that's Abdias. This is Lele Gonzalez, who is a professor, I think from Rio de Janeiro, okay? And this guy here is Zosimo Bubu, who's a very important actor in Brazil. And again, quite by coincidence, I met him like my second or third day in Brazil. Went to the Ford Foundation, he was there. And we just started talking. And 10 years later, I met his nephew, who's a really great buddy of mine, who's a great photographer. And in February, we'll be photographing in Brazil together, okay? And my friend Ventoen, or my new acquaintance then, said something like, "Oh, given your interest, you should meet my uncle Zosimo." I was like, "Zosimo? I've known him for 10 years, okay?" So the world is very, very small, okay? And this particular photograph was actually photographed in New York. He had come up to visit something, and so I photographed him. But he's a very important filmmaker. And this is one of my great buddies, no longer living, Malik Bowens, who you might have seen in Out of Africa, okay? I'm not going to stick with this image very long because the reason that I knew him was that he worked with the great British director Peter Brook, okay, in the International Center of Theater Research in Paris, okay? Now that center is also part of the motivation that you have heard the voices that you've heard today, because Brook, being British, went to Paris, and in Paris, if you don't speak really good French, they don't want to hear it, okay? And so what did Brook do? He took, I think maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 native French speakers in the company, and the rest were people who had mild accents to extreme accents and had them work in French, okay? And it's just a wonderful theater company. This was actually, at this point, Malik was an original member, okay? At this point, he had left the company, and this was at Brooks' production of the Mahabharata when it previewed or when it opened in New York City. So that's where that is, and that's Peter Brook and Malik. These are just two people I never saw before in my life, and they were willing to be photographed, which again is this idea that you don't need to know people, you just take pictures. And this is one of the greatest musicians, drummers on the planet. This is Jack DeJohnette. I mean, I worship Jack DeJohnette's music. He is so incredible. Does anybody know Jack DeJohnette? No? Oh. Well, I mean, I know of him, that's enough. I mean, that's plenty, okay? Done a lot of work with Miles Davis, with many, many others, and he's just a great musician in his own right. And he's also a piano player, okay? And I've seen him perform on piano. He's one of those musicians who, I forget who it was he was working with, but somebody listened to him play and said, you know, your piano playing is good, but your drums will change the way drums are done. And he's just an amazing guy. I don't know him. I've met him a couple times, but that's it. Now this photograph is of Jacques Vergès and Khalida Toumi. Jacques Vergès was a Vietnamese-French person who became a lawyer. He was very controversial and defended some really odd cases, such as Klaus Barbie, the Nazi officer, the terrorist Carlos the Jackal. But he also became known because he was the guy that did the blueprint for defending Algeria against legal action by Europe after the War of Revolution. He essentially made the case that there was no case to go against Algeria because the outside colonizers had no right to be there, okay? And I just happened to meet him in Algeria. And Khalida Toumi was the Minister of Culture of Algeria, and she and I got along really well. And this was at her house, and you know, Vergès was somebody that she knew. Okay. These are the fellow on the left, the white fellow, is Rich Alderson. Rich Alderson is one of the most outstanding sound engineers that exist. He basically builds recording studios and sound systems. Supposedly the first artist to carry a traveling sound system was Harry Belafonte. Rich built that system, okay? Rich also became notorious, or we'll say very well known, because when Bob Dylan did his famous first tour of Europe, Rich is the guy that recorded it. He was there, did the sound, and recorded it. Okay. The guy next to him is an incredible musician. This is Warren Smith, who plays mallets, he plays drums, he plays all kinds of percussion. He used to do a lot of Broadway work. He was in the band for Raisin, which happened to be the first Broadway production that I ever happened to see, a musical. And he does all kinds of classical work. He's done all kinds of jazz work. He was part of Max Roach's all-percussion band, Boom. He was the first musical director of Janis Joplin. And he's just done everything. And he was also my music teacher, okay? And I've had the pleasure, I've made like 4 movies about Warren, and 2 of them, the sound was done by Rich, okay? And one of them, I was showing Rich the footage so that he would have an idea of what we're doing, and he just turned and said, when you're done, you're gonna need sound. I'll do it, okay? And then I hired him another time, and I said, what's it gonna cost? And he just said, what do you got? So that's the kind of guy Rich is, okay? And he has a beautiful, beautiful studio, a beautiful studio. This is Roger Robinson, okay, who won the Tony for Best Actor in August Wilson's play, Joe Turner's Come and Gone. And he also had a contract. I think he was the first African-American actor to have a contract for a TV show. That is, he was a regular on the series Kojak, okay? And I met him at the Yale Repertory Theater, where a version of a play of Giants by Wole Soyinka was being done, and Soyinka was in fact the director. And I got to photograph that production, and that's Roger. This is actually related to his Broadway show, okay? This is a friend of mine, Elizabeth Atnafu, and she's a painter, and among other things, she did an album cover for Ornette Coleman. This is a friend of mine, a Chinese journalist who works in Chinese publications here in the United States. And this I've mentioned before, Raymond Saunders. Okay, this is Raymond Saunders, who I met in, I think it was like 1992 at a conference called African Americans in Europe, which drew a lot of people. I'm sure that Skip was there. I think I have a photograph of Skip from there. At the time, I had no idea who Raymond Saunders was. We just had like a couple pleasant conversations, and I photographed him. And unfortunately, I didn't know this, but maybe within the last 6 or 7 months, he had a show in New York City. If I had known, I would have gone, but I was not aware of the show. So this is Raymond Saunders. This is Philip Roth, the novelist who I don't know. We just happened to be having dinner at the home of a mutual friend. That's Philip Roth. And then you've already seen him. This would be Jesse Algeron Rhines. This is in Washington, D.C. Okay. And this guy, I think you all know. Okay. So this is Skip at his desk. And let me just say a few things about how optical thinking came together. I had written a series of essays called Caption to the Visual. And I'm talking about relationships of words to imagery, because in my opinion, we are creatures of words. Words dominate, and words, if attached to images, will dominate the image. That's just the way it is. That's what we believe. Okay, that's the way we function. And I had planned to use those essays for this book. But then I thought, why use old stuff? Let's do something new. And I was partly inspired because Bertoni had the nerve to get up here in the second presentation and read his new poetry. I was like, okay, let's do it. Because I do write poetry from time to time. And so I wrote this new work for this, but the poetry and the essays were based upon the material of Captions to the Visual. So I used Captions to the Visual as kind of like a blueprint for recreating the stuff. And I just thought, some freer poetry would be a better accompaniment to the photographs. And if somebody really wanted to know what I had said in the critical stuff, you can look it up, in my my biography, whatever. I had hoped to do a book of 1,000 images. But my computer just couldn't handle it. And so that's why I decided to make it into volumes. Okay, so it's conceivable that I would eventually do one big book with all the images, but I also like the idea of volumes that are independent and separate. And I also like the idea of even smaller units, like magazine handouts that you could hand out, okay? So that, all those things are possible, okay? Now, another thing about Captions to the Visual, the essays are basically about words as they relate to images. And one of the things that really, for me, keeps occurring is the manner of identification. How do we identify things? We can be specific when you identify. Sometimes identification suggests that something is exclusive, and sometimes it's identified as perhaps, oh, we have a friend here, as originary, okay? Now, I mentioned that my dad and my mom went to historically black universities, Virginia State and Lincoln Universities. Those schools, though, always had Asian students, they had white students, okay, but they're historically black universities. Schools like Yale and Harvard, okay, which are predominantly white, have also always had students of other colors, okay? But we don't call them historically white universities, okay? That's something we should think about, you know, this nature of let's be specific, let's be accurate, okay? And part of this is also, I think, really important because particularly on the part of dominant cultures, which basically means white culture in the West, there's the idea that naming yourself is unnecessary. So if you say, oh, I'm talking to a guy, it means a white person, you know. And I think that, you know, it's good to be specific. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying, oh, I was talking to this white person, and I was talking to this black person, I was talking to this Asian person, whatever it might be. And interestingly enough, although for a lot of people that is off-putting or disturbing at first, it's not an issue in the visual, okay? You show a picture of a person, it's clear. Okay, so it's something we should really think about, you know, how we identify people and why for some people it's disturbing to do so and for others it's not, okay? Bertoni and I were also talking about this earlier, that, you know, these particular words become, we'll say distorted, so that nowadays, you know, if you have the word diversity, it means minority, okay? So if you had, you know, like 15 white Europeans from different countries, and most people would not look at that as diversity, okay? So I think we need to be very careful about the way that certain words become transformed into things they really are not, okay? And they become codes that turn people one way or another. Now, this raises the question of black photography, okay? What is black photography, okay? I did an exhibition of images that were of the Staten Island ferry, okay? But some of the images you couldn't tell that it was the ferry in Staten Island. It was just a boat, okay? But they were all kind of semi-abstract, clouds and so forth and so on. The water, because I was also emphasizing the idea that New York is a maritime city. And later on, you know, I met this African-American artist who, when he found out that I was the photographer, he was shocked. He went, oh, I just assumed that that was a white photographer. And that's something you should really think about, okay? That this idea of black art is thought of as something that shows black people. And Milanka obviously understands this because her dad is an abstract painter, okay? So that's a real issue, you know? So for some people, you know, a black art would be an art that shows black people, but then again, that means who makes the art? It could be anybody, okay? And then it might mean, oh, art by black people, but then you don't necessarily look at it and see that, oh, it's black people, or some combination of those things, okay? For me, I see that there's a lot of assumption that quote-unquote black photography is heavily portrait-based, okay? It's not necessarily other subjects. And for me, if you look at a cultural group as part of your own group, then this is to say that the images are seen as somehow almost as autobiographical, okay? I mentioned this earlier, not today, and Skip added to that, oh yes, then we think of it as anthropological, okay? But since there are anthropologists in this room, anthropologists also know that there are sometimes that people look at you and go, why are you studying my culture? And shouldn't you be someplace else? Or, oh, I'm glad you're studying my culture. So it's a real issue, you know, how we go about defining what these things might be. I can give you a million examples of all that, but I'm not going to do that. I'll just say that photography ultimately means writing with light, okay? So I would look at my photographs as my autobiographical photographs, okay? Now here, when your name is Charles Martin, there's like a million of us, okay? So I created a unique name, Umaxi, which is pretty easy to pronounce. And if you Google this, you'll be taken either to my website of photography or to my website of films, okay? I am the only Umaxi, okay? So that's just something I thought I would throw up there so you can all see that. And here we have a move to the water. This is from, again, this book, Because of Algiers. He said this is the version that was redone by the Ministry of Culture in Algeria to accompany an exhibition for which I had a whole floor at a really beautiful museum in Algiers. And so here we're at water. We're looking at the sea. I've already responded to or quoted Claudia. I am now going to quote Bertoni, who also showed the sea and ended by saying merci. Thank you very much. And thanks for all the help you've all given me.
Wow, Chuck, that was fabulous.
Oh, thank you, Skip. Thank you.
Yeah, merci.
Let me just also throw in here, as some of you all know, the only reason I went to graduate school is some guy that I knew said to me, you know, you can go to graduate school. And that was Skip, and I did it.
That's right. Kristen, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Chuck, you said something intriguing. I was going to ask you something completely different until 10 minutes ago when you said, in a photograph, it's clear who's black and white. But Chuck, you know, in Brazil, there are 134 categories of who's black. So how has your experience in other cultures affected how you think of who's black and who's not? In that one photograph, you had two men. One on the left, you said the one on the left is white and the one on the right was black. But for some, say, Brazilians or Haitians or Cubans, they both would have been white. So talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
Please.
Well, for me, I think of that issue as a cultural one that's not necessarily related to my taking of the photographs, okay? And your point is extremely apropos because in some places, and I wouldn't say it's just Brazil, I'd say it's happening in the United States now as well, you talk to people and you don't know what they think that they are. And what they think they are might be very different than what you think they are. And it raises the question of whether or not what someone thinks about himself or herself affects the way you think about them. So I would say I don't really make any assumptions because, trust me, I have been in many places where somebody would tell me, oh, I'm not this or I'm not that. And I would just go, oh, okay. So I don't think that we can really know. And your question also raises a really important issue. And that would be, for example, I'm going to change the subject to autobiography. Okay. So for me, if I want information about a person, I don't read autobiography, I read a biography, okay? Because that I'm expecting to be accurate. Autobiography tells me what the person thinks that they are, how they want to be seen, okay? And so this also raises the difference of whether you think of something according to what your own criteria might be, or whether you drop your criteria for what the other person says, okay? So it's a really complex issue. I don't think there's any simple answer, and I think we just have to kind of negotiate and renegotiate and encourage people, though, to embrace many aspects of their culture. And also let me say that, I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, in my family, we definitely have Native American in us, okay? But in my family, nobody cared about that because we thought that that was a way of saying, I'm not black, okay? Nowadays, you know, you have African Americans who would embrace their Native American roots as in like, oh, that's part of my culture. So it's very tricky. It's, you know, it becomes one that varies according to time, location, and context.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
And
a shout out to you for, I think, being the first fellow ever in 33 years to have a choral reading of voices of the fellows. So right on to that, multicultural, multilingual, multi-everything, multi-gender, right on.
Thank you so much.
And a shout out to our fellow Yaley, Jesse Rhines, great to see. You know, I've known Chuck. Chuck, how long have we known each other?
We've known each other
55 years or 50
like
years or
over
something
50
like
years. Over 50 years.
Yeah,
since we were
it's amazing.
undergraduates. He used to come to watch my band play.
All right, questions, comments?
Okay, congratulations, Chuck,
Thank you.
for this beautiful presentation. And I have two questions. My questions may seem so basic, but I would like to pose them anyway. What is the difference between photographers and other people? I mean, why, if I take a photo of a view and you take a photo of the same view, your photo will be considered as a piece of art and not mine? And is the difference in the way the photo is taken or the material used, or the difference will be in the editing? I would like to know. And my second question is, in the photography language, is there a difference between photo, image, and picture? I would like to know, please. Thank you.
Okay. If my photograph is art and yours is not, which is not necessarily the case, okay, it's because of one of two things. Either I got lucky, okay, or I understand the aesthetics of the visual arts, okay? Now, in my own case, I was on my way to Brazil for the first time, which is where I really began to apply myself seriously to photography. Not because I was going to Brazil, but because I got good results. Afterwards, people said, you should stick with this, okay? I knew that I didn't know, well, actually, I had studied photography many times. My dad was a photographer, a darkroom photographer. He was not a very good photographer, but he was into it. And when I say he was not a very good photographer, a lot of people were into cameras as a hobby, you know, and he was like super into the hobby, had the darkroom and all that sort of stuff. He couldn't have cared less about the images. He just liked the process, okay? So I had studied it many, many times, okay? But when I knew I was going to Brazil, I just went to the library, the art library, all the time, and I looked at books of photography. And I didn't realize it, but what I was really looking at was aesthetics, okay? The organization of the image, okay? I did do a little bit of, you know, looking at how to develop film and all that sort of stuff, how to expose the camera, which you need to know. But it's really just that sense of aesthetics, okay? I would also say that if my photograph is art and yours is not, it's probably because I have really carefully edited, okay? That I've looked at like 50 images and said, none of them are really very good, you know? Or maybe there's one good. Whereas if you're not looking at it from that point of view, you'll just say, oh, I took the picture and that's it. And in that sense, the photograph will function as a memento. You know, it doesn't really matter what it looks like. You're just happy to say, oh, that's my cousin. You know, that's my aunt. So I think that's the issue. The difference is just taking more pictures, okay? I would also say that photography as an art also happens that when you realize that when you pick up the camera, which of course I am going to do, that one of the things that happens is you look through the camera and see what's there. You know, like what I'm seeing now is very different than like with my eye. You just have to recognize that looking through the camera is looking through the camera, okay? And then you begin to select as opposed to going, oh, let me just take a picture, okay? So I think that's it. I think that Photoshop is wonderful, okay? Because Photoshop allows you to do everything that you could do in the darkroom, but in daylight, okay? You can, it's like I hate the darkroom, okay? And if you use Photoshop or these various programs, there are those people who make it look really weird, you know, Then other people just do what you normally do to a photograph. You adjust for lighting, you adjust for this, that, and the other. You take a little bit of shadow out, you add a little something or odd. So I'm saying Photoshop is much maligned, and this is people think it's manipulation, but that's what you do when you photograph. You know, you recognize that lighting is varied and so forth and so on. So I think that answers your question about the art and the editing. Now, photo, image, picture. I'm not a purist on this stuff, okay?
What picture?
Photo, image, picture. He asks, what is the difference in the terms, okay? There are some photographers who would be disturbed if you called their photographs pictures, okay? A picture, who knows what that is? For me, they're all the same, you know, for me personally. A photograph, if anything, is the object, okay? As in, this is not really a photograph. Okay, a photograph is the printed object, okay? And then, you know, photography has a lot of issues with that, ways to try and make the object a rare item, because you didn't ask this question, but, you know, the whole issue with art is that it's unique, okay? And it's unique because there's only one or two. And so with photography and with poured sculpture, there is that issue of how do you limit the addition, okay? And that's an issue for collectors, and I understand that, you know, but in terms of the visual, it's really, from my point of view, irrelevant.
We're going to do 4 questions. Venezuela, James, Matthias, Clever,
Harry.
and 5.
Okay, so I'll just say what I want to say very quickly because it seems. Okay, so a couple of things I was thinking about as you were speaking, and I just had to write something down. So first of all, thank you for your presentation, for involving everybody in this sort of call and response presentation, and for involving poetry in, you know, the whole process. So as the poems were being read, something struck me, obviously, with the image. You talked about eyes, and I wrote this down as eyes are an instrument through which one views the lens, and through which the lens of the camera captures what the eyes can see. So pretty much it's like, you know, the eyes figure as a visual or sort of as a figurative element in your work. I wanted to mention 2 things. One of the photos that you showed to us, you talked about space, and I remember Kevin's presentation last week about, you know, resistance of people being sort of contained in space. And I would like if you could speak a little bit about that, if you find maybe there's a connection in your mind as you were trying to put together this presentation. And then second, in light with you talking about you would rather read somebody's biography than their autobiography because you feel like that is the way sort of you understand how a person wants to be viewed. So the question is, with your book, how would you want it to be remembered? How would you want people to interpret it, you know, rather than as a documented, or a documentary, if you put it that way, in quotes, of your experience and viewing and capturing all these images and pictures?
Okay, well, to start with your second question, I would hope people just go, it's a good book. You know, we like the photographs, you know, and whether or not people agree about the photographs, I couldn't care less. Okay, you know, different people, that's the point. He's like, you look at them, you interpret them, you respond to them. I just want people to go into the photographs and respond, okay, and enjoy them, and hopefully speculate as to what might be in them, what they came about. I would also just say, I'm not saying that I prefer biography to autobiography. I'm saying I prefer biography if I'm looking for accurate information, because I understand that in autobiography you distort, you lie, okay? Now it's an extreme case, I don't want to go on, but autobiography is like one of my big topics, okay? Michael Ondaatje writes autobiography, and he makes it clear that there's very little in the book that's not distorted, okay? If you read I think it's Dust Tracks on the Road, Zora Neale Hurston. The book is full of lies, okay? But it's great because he's telling you what she wants you to know, okay? So I'm just saying that they're different areas, okay? Now this question about the space. Space is just, it's there. And it's an issue. Who gets to enter it, how one enters it, what one does in that space. And, you know, our relationship to space is often clandestine. And, you know, what you can do there is kind of funny. I'll just tell you, I've told a couple of people about this already, but when I was a little kid, I was in a museum in Italy, right? And I had my little Kodak Instamatic camera. I was getting ready to take these pictures. And I don't speak Italian, but my brother spoke fluent Italian. And the guard comes over and goes, can't do that, you know? So I put the camera away. And then the guard takes my brother aside and says, you gotta be subtle, you know? So he was saying, when you wanna take the picture, you get ready to take the picture, you know? And after that, there was no problem, okay? So, you know, I think that there are all kinds of places where you never know. And we used to tell you, we were in a tailor shop, and they had no problem. I was walking over taking pictures, waiting for somebody to come and say, will you please stop doing this? But they didn't. So, I mean, you never know. I mean, you never know. Does that answer your question? Sure. Oh, great. Thank you. James.
Hi, Chuck. Thanks so much for that. I really enjoyed it. And it felt
you.
like an extension of the conversations we've been having all semester. I wanted to ask you a question about the intertextuality of your poems. Okay, so you reference reckless eyeballing, which of course is the great Ishmael Reed. And then you also mention Shadow and Act, which is Ralph Ellison. And they're both artists who were critics and novelists, and they worked across different artistic formats. And of course, Ellison was also a very keen amateur photographer.
Yes.
But I mean, the two things that are defining both of them as novelists is that they're in flight from literary realism, and they're both quite critical of social realism as the kind of accepted face of black literature. And I was wondering if you kind of place yourself in that tradition, given your own feelings about black photography and kind of quote-unquote black subjects.
I think you've summed it up exactly. You know, I feel totally a part of that tradition. And part of the reason that I feel a part of that tradition is that, you know, when I was a kid, when I went to college, I learned French well enough to be able to read it with great effort. And it was the first time I really began to enjoy literature because I was reading French African folk tales. Okay, Caribbean tales where black people were just normal. Okay, for me, like, you know, look, when I was in high school and one of my Caucasian professors said to me, "Oh, you'd love William Faulkner," and I was like, when I read that, I was like, I can understand like the formality of it. I can understand the complexity of it, but this stuff is an insult. I am sorry, you know. And so that's what's being heralded, you know, and you know, like the social realism. For me, it was a real blow. I mean, I didn't read it when I was young, but when I read Native Son, you know, I couldn't believe that there could be a protagonist, Bigger Thomas, who was inarticulate. I was like, what are you talking about? Come on, it's like talk to anybody on my street, you know? It didn't matter whether they were like, you know, a street cleaner or a doctor. They could talk, you know? So that whole social realism thing for me was itself false. And I found it very, very limiting. And I think, you know, we should be able to stand up and express ourselves. And most of us can. Now, whether or not people listen, that's another issue, okay? You know, but that doesn't mean, I mean, for me, Bigger Thomas should have been a totally articulate person that nobody was listening to, okay? That's different than saying I can't talk, okay?
Was the intertextuality kind of thought through in that sense? Like, I'm paying homage to these people?
Oh, completely. Completely. I mean, there must be some expressions that I'm unaware of their connections. But Shadow and Act, I mean, come on, you know? But see, reckless eyeballing, that was not really with Ishmael Reed in mind. okay? That was about the idea that it was a crime in the South for black people, black males to look at white women. That was reckless eyeballing, okay? So there are a lot of literary references. There's a lot of wordplay in the stuff that I've done. And, you know, some of it, I mean, even when I said, would a rose by no other name be the same? That's obviously citing Gertrude Stein. And then I also threw in, and would a Henry be, hello, Skip, would a Henry by another name be the same? So that was like a personalized comment for anybody, but also since I know Skip, it was for Skip, you know. So there's a whole lot of that stuff, and if you discover it, that's fine. And if you just look for it, that's fine, because you don't have to get there.
Thank you so much, Chuck. This was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I have a question about power. And I was thinking the whole time, I was thinking about disability studies scholars and the way that they think about the gaze or the stare. There's this really great Jewish scholar, Julia Watts-Belzer, who writes about the Talmud and the idea of the stare in the Talmud, and it's just, her work is really, really stunning. But one of the things she talks about is that difference evokes the stare. And, you know, as scholars, you know, somewhat we think about sources all the time, and I'm thinking about the things that you see as your sources. And I'm sort of wondering, how do you, when you say, you know, I stopped in my tracks and I went back, like something, there was some difference there that evoked your stare that, you know, then you pulled up a camera and gave us this image out of. And I'm just kind of wondering, what is that, what is your relationship to these sources of yours, and how do you kind of interpret the power dynamic between the photographer and the subject?
Okay. First of all, I don't think there is a power dynamic. I think that you, and as I've always said to my kids, if somebody doesn't like a photograph, don't take the picture, you don't need it, okay? So that's not to say that someone might not feel intimidated and that they want you to take the picture or not. I mean, didn't you yourself complain that I was giving you bad directions and I was taking horrible photographs of you? Okay, so, you know, it happens. You take the pictures and either they don't like it or they do. And, you know, professional photographers, I'm talking about the kind who work out in the street, frequently work with like barriers on the other side of like a window precisely to eliminate that issue. So it's not something that you can know. You know, you'll never know if someone will want to be photographed or they're not. I mean, when I was in Algeria, I don't remember which trip it was, but I had someone who was with me to just like walk around with me. And, you know, Algerians are not known for wanting to be photographed, okay? I'd be walking around the street and they would stop. I mean, I would be surrounded, and my guide got to know he couldn't keep walking because I would just be engulfed by people who are like, take my picture, take my picture. I never had anybody say no, you know. But I mean, there are times people say no, and you say, fine, I don't need to photograph, it's not a big deal. Now at the same time though, we're talking about when people know that they're being photographed. Because, I mean, I personally don't use like telephoto long lenses. But if you're shooting on the other side of the street, no one knows that you're taking a picture. So, I mean, the power thing is, it's a possibility, but again, from my point of view, I mean, except in terms of maybe decency, power is not in any way visible in the photograph. You can't know. And that's where the word comes in, you know? And that's why, for example, and it drives me up a wall personally. You know, you see all these photographs where the person says, oh, you know, I spent all, you know, like last 6 years making friends with this person, and after we got intimate, you know, I was able to photograph them, you know, or it was impossible for me to like get up this wall, but I did it, It's like, because they don't want to say it. I took the picture, it was a great picture, you know? You know, and that's where the word comes in, and that is not viewable in the image, you know? It's just not there. And so we manufacture it. That's my take. Some other photographer would feel different about it, you know. Like I just photographed you all just now. Was that a power thing? You know? So Harry says it is. So there it was, you know. Was it a bad thing? You know? So, you know, it's one of those things. Okay.
Okay, thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Thank
Chuck.
you.
I'd like to know, how do you think that being black, being African American, inform your photography? I mean, I'm not just saying the way that you think photography, just you know, look into the subjects, choosing what you're gonna take the pictures, but I'd like to know, how do you think that this influences the way that the people that you are taking pictures look into you back, you know?
You know, that's an interesting question, and I think it also varies according to your age, okay? So, I mean, just the other day, I was right by Davis Square, and I was walking along, and there was this elderly, probably younger than me, white man with a container with a big view camera in it. So I walked by and I went, "Oh, would you mind if I took a picture of this?" He said, "Oh, let me set it up for you." And so he, you know, took the camera out and set it up. And I took pictures of him with the camera. I took pictures through his camera, okay? And that was because he just related to the fact that I liked the camera and he didn't get disturbed by me, okay? Now, obviously, you know, my parents are Southerners, okay? And when I spent my time in the South, you know, we were on the farm, that was it, okay? There are places I would not walk into with a camera and say, "I want to take a picture," okay? And so, I mean, I think it again varies on location, but I think, you know, as an African American, I feel sensitive about, I have a certain sensitivity. I'm aware that there are issues that are floating around, some expressed, some not. And this is not about being African American, this is about me. I would rarely, almost never, photograph something that's not appealing to me. Like, I would not be the documentary photographer who goes out and shoots things that are just horrible, you know? And that might be because, like, as a kid, my mom used to say, "There's enough horrible stuff out there, why are we gonna read that?" You know? It was like, you know, let's do the good stuff. So, I mean, for me, you know, if let's look at this one here. This one's got the portraits, you know. If I look at this book, like, you know, again, there's like Malik and Roger Robinson, I'm gonna smile. You know, I'm not looking to go, "Oh, this disgusting person." I was like, you know, if somebody annoys me, I don't take the camera out. It's that simple, you know. But I'm saying that's a personal thing. You know, if I was a professional photojournalist, you can't come back and go, "I thought the guy was a jerk, I ain't taking this picture." That doesn't work, you know. So, I mean, for me, it really is personal. You know, it's what pleases me. You know, it's like the difference between being an original musician and being in a cover band. You know, if you're in a cover band, the work might be more difficult, but you got to play it. You know, if you're an original musician, it's like, "I like this song, that's why we play it."
Yes, thank you. Chuck, thanks so much for this presentation. It was really great to hear you talk about your work.
Thank you.
And congratulations on striking an original format for presenting your colloquium. That's a point.
Well,
or more,
thank you
or
all.
10. Yeah. And thanks for having me in the chorus and the others. I was really thankful for the things you said. It seems like your presentation kind of took a turn. You started talking about race. And I was really engaged by the things you were saying about that, so thank you. I disagree with you on Bigger Thomas, but that's for another day.
Okay.
You spoke a lot about public space, and you may recall, or may not, that when Itzel gave her presentation, I talked about my interest in what are called First Amendment auditors, and these are people who, in public space, use video cameras to document what they see and the reactions people have to them, from the lay public to the law.
Right.
And why are you taking my picture is one of the common things one hears when these people operate. And you gave a list of things that photographs or images do. I think you implied this, but you didn't explicitly say that photographs can also be fetishized. People can stare at them, have erotic responses to them that can make people uncomfortable. But the insights you gave were really helpful to me, because I often hear people in these YouTube videos react, and what I mostly think of is how years ago I would hear about how supposedly pre-contact civilizations, white Western contact civilizations would imagine or think that taking a picture took part of their spirit away. This is the way it was presented, whether that's true or not.
Right, who knows?
But, yeah. But I thought, like, I used to think, oh, that's what an idea, and then I would see, modern Western people almost act in a similar way. So it was interesting when you brought that up and said that. I have two questions, if I may.
Of course.
One, do you print these books yourself? And if so, what is the process by which you do so? Is it a service that you use? I'm really just struck by the quality of the object that you've made, if so.
Okay.
And two, why do you think in the history of photography was there such a long debate and a reluctance to accept photography as art?
Okay. Thank you for leading me to both of these things. Bookmaking. This book is magnificently done, okay? This book was designed by an outstanding designer. He was my colleague at Queens College, okay? And he shopped this book around to he searched out various this book was printed in China because he basically was trying to say, let me find a good publishing outlet that's basically cheap. He had various possibilities in like Spain and Italy. He just made the choices, okay? Now, this is the kind of guy I like to work with, It's like you give him the photograph and he's like, so call me back in a month, like, get out of here, I don't need you anymore. And so he did, well, I did lay out the book, okay? Because he thought that Chuck ought to do some work.
The order of the photos you
Yes, I did that. But all the other stuff was done by him and choosing with whom to work, okay? Now, although I would always act like I didn't know anything because that just made him work harder, I did pay attention to what he was doing, okay? And I paid attention not to process, but to what I consider the result, okay? So when I did this book is entirely me, okay? And I just, learned how to use a design program, and I laid out all the photographs in order in my computer, okay? And then as I would stick them in, I would then sometimes rearrange their positioning, okay? And to me, there was a sense of like order, organization, okay? Which for me is also, we'll say, relatable to the fact that I love to do exhibitions. And when you do an exhibition, there are like two kinds of exhibitions. One, you drop up the photographs and the gallery goes, we'll let you know when it opens, okay? And there's the other one that say, do the work, okay? And they both work, So I enjoy the process of designing the work. I like laying it out. The textual stuff, I like laying that out as well. I don't know like a million forms of typography, but I can, do a few that work, okay? Now, the printing itself, this book is very well done, okay? This printer I just lucked up on. I found the printer online. I'll tell a couple of people of this. I went in, this is in New York. I went in and wandered around the store, and after a while, they started paying attention to me, and then they said, when I showed them what I wanted to have done, they said, at the end, how'd you find us? And I said, oh, you're online. And they went, where? And I showed them the address, and it was somebody that they were subletting space to that they obviously didn't really like, And so I had walked into their office totally by accident. And they had all these beautiful, what this company does is they basically would make books like this, I mean, for someone like me, that's okay. But they really are doing it for professional publishers in order to show an idea. So there are these places, and I'm sure that this is not the only one,
And sorry, when you say to show an idea, you mean a limited number of copies, like a 100 or 250 or something like that.
Right.
Or
right.
3.
Yeah, and they would do that. And they have samples, and the samples are really beautiful. And I'm better now than I was, say, even 6 months ago. But I went in, and there were some little problems with my technical stuff on the design, and they just said, where is your stuff? I said, it's on my computer. I said, sit down, and they put me in a corner with a desk, and they told me what to do, and then I would, show them, and they'd go like, yeah, okay. And this one, I made a few changes. There are 5 versions of this that are slightly different, and I called them up and I said, I want to make some changes, and the guy said, didn't we say you were going to wake up in the light and want to make changes? So they were very we're artists, we understand, it's okay, as opposed to that's the way it is. So they changed the press and did the rest the way that I wanted to. So I think it's just a question of looking around, and you find a place that works. I've not any experience with, the whatever they call it, print by whatever. Print on demand. I don't know about that. Doing it this way, there are problems because it costs money, and also if you do it yourself, you have total control, okay, but you also end up with a bunch of books, like when I did this book, which the Du Bois Center did help with this book. This was a co-production of the Algerian government, the U.S. Embassy, Queens College, Queensborough College, and here, okay, which was a whole lot of negotiating. But when we were considering who might actually publish the book, and in this case, there was a real publisher. The publisher is Queensborough Community College. My designer said, well, you can go someplace else and have them do it, but you can't work with me because they'll have their own designer. And so I said, well, we're not doing that. You're the designer, that's it. So that is a real issue, and as I pointed out to you, when this book was redone for Algeria, they did the book differently. I had no control over that. I didn't care, really, but they didn't do what I did, So, that is an issue with, any magazine. They'll, you submit stuff, and, they might want it or they might not, and you just, it's just the way it works. And I've had a couple of cases with publications, both in the United States, or both in the United States, in Brazil, and in France, where they loved my work for a while, and then they'd go oh, we don't have any space, And when they do that, I just go, time to find somebody new, So editors do have an editorial perspective, and they're entitled to that in the same way that a gallery has that. My last show in Brooklyn, they gave me 5 rooms and said, do what you want to do. That's not normal, okay? And when I had my show in Algeria, they gave me a whole floor, but it wasn't really do what you want to do, It was do what you want to do as long as it's Algeria, So, it varies from situation to situation, and so that's kind of the way I've worked that. Now, you also mentioned this question of photography as art. Okay, that's a real complex issue. Oh, okay. Then I'll just say that photography as art is a construct in the art market. End of session. End of comment. Thank you all very much. Thank you.